How are you doing, Richard? Good morning to you.
Hello, Douglas. Good to see you. Looking great there in that shirt this morning.
I don't know. I thought I'd bring out the butterflies today. So I'm in that transformational mode, you know.
Is that what you're doing? Okay, I'm up.
I'm looking forward to this this morning, this discussion. So we want to have a conversation with the one and only Jenny from the Medway Foundation Trust. She's Associate Non-Executive Director and the Chair of the Medway Innovation Institute. So, Jenny, how are you doing? That was a mouthful for title. How are things?
Not too bad. It's good. Well, I'm glad that you're the one doing the introduction and not me then.
I had to break it up. So, a role so massive as that, can you just break down what you do in each of those roles?
Well, actually, no, I do more than just that kind of role. I work a lot in innovation in general. So not only as the Associate Non-Exec Director for Medway Foundation Trust, which I joined in February last year. So it was literally right before COVID locked everything down. And in July, when we launched the Medway Innovation Institute, I then took over as chair, which has been fantastically interesting, just in terms of the project that we're seeing. And what I try to do is bring that energy to them, because everyone's so tired, you know, sometimes they're just fed up with doing the same thing over and over again. And they have all these ideas in their head, but where's the forum for them to air it? And we have the Innovation Institute to do it. So really just bring the energy, bring the encouragement and support to them. But in my other portfolio of innovation stuff that I do, I also work with Imperial College London, where I act as a mentor and advisor to the startups that incubate there. I'm also on the committees of the Design Museum and the Egypt Exploration Society, bringing that kind of like digitization and innovation. Plus, I'm also an advisor to some startups. But before all this, joining the medical world and innovation, I actually spent 20 years in investment banking, where my focus was on technology, big data, and artificial intelligence.
Wow.
That's quite some experience, Jenny. Just looking across the breadth of what you've seen, what are the things that excite? What stands out to you? What are the digital innovations that get traction, that succeed, that make an impact? Do you see any common traits?
Usually, when I look at a startup and I look at their pitch, the thing that gets them to success would be, are they solving a problem? I always ask them to ask themselves, are they solving a problem? And the projects that come to us, are we solving a problem for our patients or for our staff? So that's the single thread that I think that runs to a lot of successful programs that we see. Because even with technology, it can be successful. And the most amazing idea can also fail. But why? One, they might not be solving a problem. Two, they might not be talking to the people who are actually using that technology. Always engage with your end user, always engage with your patient. If the person who's using it doesn't see the value in it, they switch off completely.
What sort of lessons can the NHS learn from other sectors, such as banking?
Interesting question, because actually sometimes there's a bit of a paradox when it comes to translating what works in a banking world to the NHS world. So let me start from that angle first. I think sometimes we try to run the NHS as an enterprise, and we might be trying to take that from the banking world and say, what's been really successful there? And let's try to bring it to the NHS. If it works there, surely it works for us. But the mindset and the way they work in investment banking could be quite different. There is a lot of focus on capitalism, a lot of ruthless attention to what's on the bottom line. And our customer is quite different from a patient. So from the top, I sometimes think we are trying to run the NHS like that enterprise, and sometimes infuse that Japanese management style efficiency. But this might conflict with that professional services that we're trying to run on the ground with our patients. So we end up trying to squeeze that pipeline to maximize the capacity in terms of like our bed capacity or our operational efficiency, like our procurement, but we squeeze it so tight that what happens is our own workforce start getting so tired and they're bursting at the seams, they can't cope. But what does work in banking is that risk taking, right? Just get things done, do it quickly, try it out. How do we bring that into the NHS? And again, probably the NHS is trying to play that catch up there, because to be an innovator, you have to be curious. You have to want to explore. but it means you also have to be willing to take risks and plunge straight in. Put yourself out there, just try it out, get it done. Keep learning and improving. And if you think about it, doctors are inherently risk takers. You need to think quickly and also have the willingness to try out new things on the patient. But the NHS over the years hasn't really condoned that risk-taking mindset, and neither does it condone failure. And it's not easy when you try to get people to wear two hats. Like, let's come back to what Richard was actually discussing right before we recorded at Tomorrow, and the different hats that we might wear. In your operational day job, you're wearing a hat where you're highly risk averse in a highly regulated environment, a governance environment, and zero tolerance for failure. But yet to improve, we have to innovate and we have to think differently. Now, this innovation hat requires you to think outside the box, to try new things and to embrace failure to learn. So there's too much conflict between the principles at the top with the ethos on the ground, which only makes actually both sides quite fragile. But what we want to try to do is build a robust, resilient structure that gets us to a common purpose. And I think actually during COVID, we saw that common purpose. And that's why we saw people working so well.
How do organizations, how do health systems do that innovative stuff in that environment on an ongoing basis then, Jenny?
I think because we are just recovering from the pandemic, it's very hard to be prescriptive about what is going to work in general for the NHS right now. I think each trust is quite different. The mindset, the workforce is quite different. So you almost have to empower people on the trust level to say, what is going to work for your team? How are you going to get them to recover? Rather than being prescriptive from the top and say, this is a kind of one size fits all. And I guess in terms of like leadership, just 3 simple actions. Be a supporter, be visible, and be a leader. Ultimately, we're here to serve our staff and support our staff to be the best that they can. So like being a supporter, and I'll just take an example. I'm an exec sponsor for our BAME network. And one of our flagship projects for this year is reciprocal mentoring, with a BAME member mentoring a senior exec. And it's reciprocal because there's a balanced power dynamic and to ensure that we have joint accountability for actions. And what we want to do is support our staff by listening to them, active listening, and they can teach us so much through their lived experience. And how do we be visible too? During COVID, a lot of us couldn't even go into the trust. We talk about visibility, but we're physically not there, yet we expected all our staff to come in to treat the patients. So I tried to do as many visits as I could to be visible, but also in a safe and secure manner. And what I wanted to show the staff was that, we are here to hear your thoughts and concerns. We're here to see what's important for you and just show that kind of moral support. And everywhere I went, I saw that passion. I saw the compassion for the patient coming through. So visibility now is probably even more important now that we can kind of start going back. And third one, be a leader. When this COVID is over, how do we maintain this one team dynamic that we saw that got us through COVID? Right? And how do we continue to have a one purpose to make sure that we're on the same journey to success?
Because the models we've got to create now to run the business are significantly different because of the pressures on us. It doesn't matter if it's staff numbers, backlogs. We need a different way of thinking about this, don't we?
Absolutely, fundamentally different. I mean, if we think about the NHS, it's probably suffered so many years of underinvestment. Think about digital and data, for example. It's always been on that nice to have pile, right? It never got the priority it deserved. But what did we see during the pandemic? The organizations that were able to adopt digital platforms quicker, they recovered faster. The organizations that had easy availability to data, they could react faster. So fundamentally, there needs to be a shift, probably along the entire pipeline of how we look at things differently.
Oh, so excellent. So Jenny, over the last 12 months, has there been anything that stood out that you can really share with us in terms of bringing about that change?
I mean, there's so many takeaways and so many lessons, I think, but I will try to distill them in the time that we have. For me, the biggest takeaway is that one team, one purpose. It's amazing how during the pandemic, we had very disparate teams in our trust that actually all came together with that common clarity of purpose. And through that united sheer force of will, we pushed through the barriers, we cut through the bullshit, and we just got things done. That was the only way that got us through the toughest time that the entire NHS experienced. So my takeaway is let us not underestimate the force of the human spirit that we have in our trust. In terms of the lessons, again, a lot of them, but the top three I have is around active listening, technology, and also diversity inclusion. From an active listening perspective, I mean, we have people on the ground who work with the patients. They know what works, what doesn't. And when we start empowering people at the grassroots level to start driving that change, give them a voice, they come up with amazing things. So we just need to listen better. We need to amplify their voice and give them a safe space to actually innovate. This will in turn build up their confidence to own and drive positive change for the future. From an innovation and technology perspective, that is not scary, right? Technology is not as scary as we all used to think it was. We have seen our patients embrace virtual outpatient appointments. We now have more than 40% of it that's virtual, resulting in reduced cancellations and did not attend. We've seen our staff really embrace remote working. They're now more comfortable using cloud collaboration technologies. Plus, we also reached out to our patients. We gave them pulse oximeters, pedometers, so that we can start doing that remote patient monitoring. But there's so much more we can do with those edge devices to start collecting the data and improve population health. So I think during the pandemic, organizations started thinking creatively, right? So with the Medway Innovation Institute, we really try to drive that innovation.
How you find that different people at different positions, hierarchical positions, are either more risk averse or less risk averse?
Absolutely. People all have different tolerances of risk. You have the clinician who wants to take the risk because they think it might be better for the patients, but they have that governance tapping on their shoulder going, oh, you better think twice about that. And that stops them taking the risk they can. You have the people at the top who are risk averse because it might affect the constitutional targets. So their mindset, again, is very different. They might be thinking about the figures. So yeah, it's hard to look at the different risk levels and say what works best, I think. But I think we are starting to get there. And by changing the mindset of our organization to start thinking innovatively, to tell them, well, let's give it, and I think, but risk is also about safety. If we give you a safe space to innovate, to think differently, that would then grow your confidence. But we don't have enough of that right now in the NHS or in our trust.
So it strikes me that empowerment is a big issue for you across the board, both in the community and in the trust itself. Would that be right?
Well, in a way, you say big issue. I would like to think big opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. You're right to correct me. Thank you.
Yes. Do we talk enough to the patients? I mean, we have a program right now that we have huge focus on, which is around patient first, to ensure that the patient is front and center of everything we do. And the patient voice is the golden thread that runs through everything we do in terms of our strategy and our programs. So let us make sure we get out there and talk to them enough. During COVID, it was hard to actually talk to them. It was hard for them to come into the hospital. So we had to change the way we connected. And I think actually that virtual connection allowed us to actually get out there a lot more. So one of the programs that we ran during COVID was the patients will see you now. We wanted to have these virtual forums where we heard the patient voice. So we used that patient community to actually start co-designing our digital strategy. And we also wanted to ask them, what are your fears when adopting technology? What makes it difficult? And sometimes we make such presumptions about why people might fear technology, but actually hearing it from that through their own voice, that was actually quite insightful and made us fine-tune how we could make our digital strategy work best. I think there's huge opportunity and we're going to do a lot more with that.
So Jenny, you mentioned about energy, and certainly myself and Richard, we could testify your bundle of energy, and that is so infectious. How do you maintain that level of enthusiasm and energy through a transformational piece of work that has ebbs and flows? And
energy can be hard to sustain sometimes, but I get my energy of working with people who I think have a passion to get things done. And there's no lack of people in the NHS with that passion to improve things for the patient. But you just need to almost ignite that. And how do you get them to also own that? Because to drive things forward, you have to own it, right? And ownership sometimes is quite a heavy word. It feels like there's a lot of responsibility while you're trying to manage your day job. But if we don't own it, then we'll find it hard to persist and sustain and see it to the end. But if we do own it, then success is going to taste twice as sweet. I would say one, let's give them a framework and tools to get them going. How do we get them excited about ideas they have to drive that change? And how do we guide and support them while they're trying to explore and learn at the same time? And if they fail, and I say the NHS sometimes has zero tolerance for failure, let's have their back when they fail to make them feel and get a sense of confidence. And if they succeed, let's make sure we give them recognition for their success. And I think through all this, we would then build their confidence so they feel more comfortable about taking ownership and sustaining that energy they have and that passion throughout the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. Excellent point there.
Just pause for a moment. Let that sink in.
Yeah, I think so. Let that marinate.
And you've talked a lot here about actually the environment for success. I think for you, it feels to me that it's the environment, not necessarily the tools, that are the critical issue. That's what's coming over. Would that be right? Or you create the circumstances in which people can succeed, both patients and staff.
Absolutely. If you're working in an environment that you don't feel empowered, you don't feel supported, you disengage.
Yeah.
Why do we like working in a team? Because we like working with the people that are there with us. We like working in an environment that we feel that we are supported by our management and that people who have our back. So the environment counts for so much, and sometimes it's underestimated. We think that people sometimes are not doing a good job, and we say, yeah, no, they're crap. But no, actually it's not. People don't come in to do a good job. They don't deliberately come in not to do a good job. They want to, but they're just not given the right environment for them to grow and feel supported to do a good job.
What struck you over the last year?
Well, I would say not a specific intervention, maybe,
Okay.
But I think the main one for me is actually that move of digital health to a patient's device, either through the IoT devices that they have that monitor their stats and progress, or the interaction with an application to start logging their health data. Because actually this federated form of data collection builds up this really rich demographical picture of patients, which I think from an NHS provider point of view, it can drive better population health interventions and research. So we also start empowering patients to take more ownership of their health because we give them that insight straight away. But I think there are also other interventions that probably have quite a lot of potential, but maybe not so embedded in the NHS right now, and in the space of particularly unstructured data analytics. So for example, using natural language processing, we can get faster and better insight from the notes and commentary in our patient records. Right now, our patient records, a lot of them are probably still stuck on paper records. How do we kind of unlock that? And how can we use computer vision on medical images such that we can augment what a radiologist does? We know that we don't have enough radiologists, but we can use AI to complement that work so that radiologists can focus on doing what they do best, spending that time with the patient, not stuck with tedious tasks like image quality assessments. And one that has quite a lot of potential is around graph networks. So by using graph networks and relationships, maybe we can now start connecting the dots across the patient journey, but that probably involves us opening up or rather unlocking the data silos that we all have.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really conscious of time. So what would be your takeaways, I guess? What would you be saying as things that trusts could go out and do now that would make a difference in terms of the backlog of how they're moving forward and progressing and enjoying success?
I think given where we are in the pandemic, it's really about focusing on our people first. Before we kind of go out there, we look to see how can we get our own staff to recover, because they are such an asset. So maybe I'll kind of give two takeaways. One takeaway being that presuming we are in a normal world 2 years ago before the pandemic happened, and the other in where we are right now, is tell your staff, give yourself permission to start thinking outside the box. Be constantly curious and get the creative muscle kind of working. But for you to do that, you can't do it alone. You have to find your tribe. You have to find people like you in your environment who are passionate about driving the improvement, because together you can get things done much better and quicker. But again, now where we are in that kind of like post-pandemic world is just get some rest first. When everybody else was there trying to perfect their banana bread recipe, growing their tomatoes, right? And NHS did not stop working. People continued coming in. So to be creative, which is the first takeaway, you need that refreshed brain and refreshed eyes. So just get a rest first.
Absolutely. The recuperation. And certainly what I'm getting from the conversation is this whole sense of removing inertia. NHS was stuck in this state of inertia and literally need to be reanimated. Compelling event COVID has hit. We're changing the way that we're doing things. So I'm truly inspired to hear your stories and the solutions that you've got in place. And now the fact that you're not scared to mention the word risk. Sometimes the word risk just shuts down the conversation, but you own it, you hold that space around risk and make it seem as if this is just a natural process that we all have to go through. So for that, Jenny, I'm very thankful.
Not a problem. I mean, it's like kids, right? Our kids, they take risks because they are not fearful of failure. But we are so fearful through our lived experience that we just don't dare to do it. So how do we actually get that kid's mindset in terms of risk-taking and curiosity to improve?
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Jenny, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just across such a range of issues, and thank you so much. Really delighted. Thank you for helping out, contributing to Think Big, Act Now. You will help people across the country, and we're delighted. So thank you from us.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, guys. Hi. Hi.
Hey there.
Still got goosebumps, Jenny.
Well, goosebumps for you, but I think I'm rather traumatized from hearing myself speak for the last 20 minutes. You know, your voice always sounds strange, right? Hearing it back.
It doesn't matter how it sounds, it's what you say, and it was brilliant. And I'll repeat what Rob Lambert said in chat. So inspiring. He nailed it in one. Well done, Rob. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Too kind.
Absolutely. And we've got a couple of questions. I know we went slightly over time, but it was worth it. This was one of the videos that we couldn't really condense any shorter. So straight off the bat, we've got a question from Rob in terms of this situation between banking and healthcare, the example you gave, yeah? Do you think that we're losing the patient-centered view of healthcare? Do you think that some of the wedge between the sectors is derived from incorrectly treating patients like commodities instead of the customers, accidentally treating government as the customer, as it were?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack in that question.
Was powerful.
Yes, in banking, and we always try to maximize efficiency, spend as little as we can. And so when we build products, we say build it once and commoditize it. That means building a scalable approach that can be generalized across multiple processes or multiple customers. Don't create those bespoke customizations because they take up effort, time, and money. But actually, if you think about it, patients and humans are all unique. We are not just numbers. We have a different background, we have different history, and we have different needs. So yes, if we try to start applying what we're doing in the banking and finance world about commoditization, then we're going to find it very hard to connect to each and every patient and create that personalized experience for them. In our trust, we had a program where I think it was hashtag you are not just a number. And that was trying to change our mindset to actually see the patients in front of us. They're not a number, they're a person with a name, with a family. And they're probably suffering at that time. So how can we make the experience better? And do we bow towards the people who pay our salaries? Yes, we do that a lot because their voice is louder. They are the ones cracking the whip. But at the end of the day, in the NHS, the person who pays our salary is actually the taxpayer. And that is our patient. So how do we transfer the focus back to them? It's a difficult one to do, I think.
Excellent.
Just sticking with the patient perspective, Jenny, you talked in there about empowering patients. I mean, I don't think you were just talking about the superficial bit that I hear quite often. I think you were talking about a much more fundamental shift in power. How big is that shift, do you think, if we're really going to make an impact on the health system?
I think there's no prescriptive manner again about how we change that shift. Because do we take what the government is telling us and apply? Do we try to see what works for our own trust? Do we try to see what works for our region? Because demographics play a very different, very different kind of like picture in terms of how do we treat our patients. If we look at our area in Medway, our patients are probably in a very deprived area. So we need to take into account the cultural context, but it might be very different when you talk about patients in London. So as a trust, we have to understand the people around us, our community, and that's through engaging with them. But obviously collaborating a lot with the people in the wider system to understand actually what works best, because we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Let's take what everybody does best and try to then apply it, but also applying that lens, that local lens we have, because ultimately it is our local community that's going to be walking through the doors of our hospital, and we again need to create a personalized experience for them.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We had another question from Kamal, and this is in relation to the pandemic that has united us, and we managed to move swiftly and effectively during that process. Do you think we still have the same level of support to push the boundaries, to innovate and make use of digital technology to improve the NHS?
Well, we don't stop being innovative, I think. It is not something that we can just turn on and turn off. And innovation is not just about technology and AI and digital transformation. Innovation is about doing things differently. It might feel that we're all very tired right now, we don't want to be constantly firefighting or constantly finding solutions. Yes, that's where the rest kind of comes in, but fundamentally, we don't stop being innovative. We are always finding solutions to problems every day, even in our everyday lives. I think right now we probably have a better recognition and appreciation about how we can think innovatively across all levels. We have the attention of the policymakers who, I think Rob reminded us, probably holds the purse strings. But we also have the passion of the younger generations who through COVID have actually now woken up to the fact that healthcare is important, population health is important. And the number of startups I see coming up where actually healthcare is at the center of what they do, I think there has been a fundamental shift towards understanding healthcare and then applying innovation to that. So no, I don't think we will run out of energy and juice in the innovation area.
Good, thank you. Jenny, in your interview, in that discussion, you talked about clarity of purpose quite often, but health systems, hospital systems are incredibly complex, serving a rich mix of stakeholders and purposes. What the leadership conundrum is, how do you bring that clarity of purpose, or that addresses what people going off in all directions? How do you bring them together in your mind in a sort of focused way?
Yes, we're always dragged from pillar to post.
Yeah,
the government comes down with their priorities. We have the CQC coming down with their priorities. We have the local demographic that gives us a different set of priorities, local politicians. You can try to do everything. You can try to bow to the person who shouts the loudest, but then you probably then achieve nothing. So I think we probably need strong local leadership, somebody who sometimes actually can take a step back and say, okay, what's everybody talking about? But what's going to be delivered the best bang for the buck, maybe? Given the resources and the expertise we have within our trust and locally, actually what can we deliver quickly and effectively? And that communication is so important, right? The person who shouts the loudest doesn't mean that their priority should be the highest. So having strong local leadership, having a probably strong chief exec within our trust who can actually come in and see, sometimes with a fresh pair of eyes, something just taking a step back and say, let me reassess the landscape. I think that's quite important.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. That was truly inspiring, and you certainly evoked the curiosity mindset for many people, and with real practical tips of what needs to be done on a human-to-human level to bring about change. So on the behalf of Think Big, Act Now, thank you very much for your time, Jenny.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Continue thinking big and continue acting.
Thank you.
Jenny, thank you. All the very best.
Thank you.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah, fantastic. Wow. Yeah, I knew that already. I knew that with Jenny. So even when I was writing down the questions, I wanted to ask her. She had already covered it in a response to a question that you had already posed. So it was like, okay, let's see where we're going to mirand with this conversation. And yeah, she's a very inspirational, powerful woman. Lots of take homes there. You know, she's done it all really, and she's doing it all still. So what can we say? The risk taking was a theme throughout. Supporting staff, you know, and I think and your point about the engagement piece is so important. Listening, and I think you said naive listening there. All of those components creates that environment whereby people feel acknowledged, and people do not speak when they do not feel acknowledged. You have to acknowledge them first. Then they will reveal things about themselves and their fears, concerns, worries, aspirations. And I think that's what we need in technology. So people to first be acknowledged for who they are, irrespective of, you know, the things that are outside their own control.
Yeah.
You know?
But there are so many things in the NHS that mitigate against that. And it's not even people, it's the systems and the processes.
Absolutely.
The clinical requirements. They make it really hard, which makes almost the NHS one of the hardest places in the world to do that.
Yes.
And it's absolutely necessary. But I think for leaders listening into this, it is about them being so cognizant of that and almost having to work harder than leaders in any other sector to make it happen, because otherwise the system itself will stop it happening, which is really sad. Because I believe there's lots of leaders out there who want to do what Jenny's talking about.
Correct. And again, this is where the eclectic background really, really adds that extra validity and value in the space that we're in. Sometimes if you're too much in the same space, the culture dictates everything that you do. You in a sense, you need to be re-educated to take risk. Until somebody else shows you what the outsider are doing, you might take a listen to that. So no, I found it very fascinating. It was a masterclass in leadership. I've learned a lot about leadership, how the breadth of it, and not being scared to go deeper on particular subjects, using technology as a complementary capability to enhance an environment.
And what was interesting, she actually hardly mentioned tech today.
Yeah.
I tried to take her there just to see, and she wasn't interested. For her, it's the platform, it's the stage on which her teams can go out and perform to the best of their ability. And
absolutely,
how do you create a stage that can enable that facilitates that? Wonderful, really good, loved it.
Brilliant.